So good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for the invitation to present our findings here today. And I'm really happy to be at this conference and hear all of the research going on in Europe and across the world. My name is Laura Baams, my pronouns are she, her, and I work at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And the work on dating violence that I'm presenting today was conducted in collaboration with Wouter Kiekens, Jessica Fish, Ryan Watson, Amanda Pollitt, and Alexa Martin-Story. I would like to start by acknowledging the funders and support for the two papers that I'm presenting today. Okay, when we talk about dating and dating violence in adolescence, it's important to keep in mind that dating and sexual or intimate relationships are part of normative development and even seen as a developmental task during adolescence. So this means that for most adolescents, there is some experience with dating or sexuality during adolescence. For some, this may start as group dating, move on to one-on-one dating, and then moving on to more serious or committed relationships. And at some point during adolescence, relationships may become sexual, they may become casual sexual relationships, and we might also see some online sexual behavior or sexting. Dating violence is unfortunately a part of these relationships for many. And sexual and physical dating violence can take many forms, but experiences range from emotional to physical to sexual forms of violence in committed relationships or casual relationships or even by strangers. And research from the past decades has shown that sexual and gender minority youth are more likely to experience dating violence compared to heterosexual cisgender youth, and that it's not limited to victimization. Sexual and gender minority youth are also more likely to perpetrate sexual and physical dating violence. However, most of this research is conducted with a heteronormative lens focused on men as perpetrators within male-female relationships, where men are really assumed to hold more power. And there's also a lack of research on sexual scripts among sexual and gender minority youth. Their unwritten rules and expectations within relationships that may hold them within violent patterns of behavior. And the first paper that I'll present today was recently published in Journal of Interpersonal Violence by my PhD student, Wouter Kiekens. And in this study, we were interested in how patterns of relationship experiences and dating violence varied across sexual and gender identities. We used data from a large adolescent survey conducted in the US among 13 to 17-year-old sexual and gender minority adolescents. The data was collected in 2017 across the US. And the largest group identified as gay or lesbian, a group of similar size identified as bisexual, and smaller groups used labels such as queer or pansexual. And adolescents with different gender identities participated, including large groups of non-binary and trans youth. And it's important to note here that the heterosexual group endorsed a heterosexual sexual identity in combination with a minority gender identity. And the survey that was used asked about relationship experiences, ranging from no experience at all, so never dated, to exclusive dating or dating with multiple people. Questions about sexual and physical dating violence asked about being forced to do sexual things, being hurt on purpose, or receiving unwelcome sexual comments, jokes, or gestures. Questions about sexual assault and harassment asked about being forced to do things that you did not want to do. And I already said receiving unwelcome sexual comments, jokes, or gestures. So we found that the largest groups of sexual and gender minority adolescents were at the very beginning of their sexual and relationship career. 72% of the sample had few dating experiences and did not experience dating violence, assault, or harassment. A smaller group had experience with dating, but low to intermediate experiences with dating violence. This was about 13% of our sample. An even smaller group, 8.6%, had advanced dating experiences and experienced high levels of dating violence and assault. And the smallest group, 6.3%, still sizable considering the size of the sample, had high levels of all of these measures. So advanced dating experiences and had experienced high levels of dating violence, sexual assault, and sexual harassment. Our aim was to compare these groups in terms of sexual identity and gender identity. And for sexual identity, our reference category were youth who identified as gay or lesbian, and for gender identity, our reference group were cisgender boys. And we found that there were no sexual identity or gender identity differences between the likelihood of having no experience with dating violence, the green dot, and having some experiences, the orange dot. However, we do see that bisexual adolescents are more likely to experience high levels of dating violence compared to gay and lesbian youth. And we also see that cisgender girls, trans boys, and non-binary youth assigned male at birth were more likely to experience dating violence and assault and harassment compared to cisgender boys. So these findings show that for many, dating violence goes hand in hand with dating experiences. We did not see clear differences in the likelihood of experiencing harassment and assault, but we do see clear differences in experiencing violence in the context of dating, particularly for bisexual, trans, and non-binary adolescents. So I'll present the findings now of a second study, also about dating violence among sexual and gender minority youth, published in Journal of Adolescent Health, with my colleagues Amanda Pollitt and Alexa Martin-Story. We looked into patterns of dating violence victimization, again, as well as perpetration among sexual and gender minority youth compared to heterosexual and cisgender youth, and whether factors in their environment, such as peer victimization and childhood maltreatment, might predict experiences with dating violence. We used data from the Minnesota Student Survey conducted in Minnesota, again in the US, in grades 9 and 11. And our sample was predominantly heterosexual and cisgender, but because of the large size of the sample, we were able to compare different sexual and gender identity groups. So to assess victimization, the survey asked about verbal, physical, and sexual dating violence victimization, as well as perpetration by a boyfriend or girlfriend. So questions included, have you ever had a boyfriend or girlfriend in a dating or serious relationship who called you names or put you down verbally, hit, slapped, or physically hurt you on purpose, or pressured you into having sex when you did not want to? And those same questions were worded for dating violence perpetration. For childhood maltreatment, the survey asked about verbal, physical, or sexual violence, as well as witnessing domestic abuse in the home. And peer victimization was assessed as a general scale of experiences with violence and exclusion in the context of peers, as well as bias-based bullying directed at the sexual orientation, gender expression, or gender of the adolescent. So these are the patterns that we found. The largest group, the dark line at the bottom of this figure, did not experience dating violence, victimization, or perpetration. And the other groups are smaller in size and show either only victimization or victimization and perpetration together, with different levels of probability across those experiences. And overall, we found that sexual minority adolescents were more likely to experience high levels of victimization, as well as the combination of victimization and perpetration compared to heterosexual adolescents. Transgender adolescents were also more likely to experience victimization and perpetration of dating violence compared to cisgender adolescents. And our second aim was to look at experiences in their environment and how that predicted the likelihood of experiencing victimization and perpetration of dating violence. And we found that bias-based bullying, peer victimization, and childhood maltreatment explained all of these disparities in dating violence victimization for all sexual and gender minority groups. And it explained victimization and perpetration for all sexual and gender minority groups, especially witnessing domestic abuse and sexual abuse by a family member explained disparities in victimization and perpetration. Our findings map onto previous research showing that sexual and gender minority youth are more likely to experience dating violence victimization and perpetration than heterosexual and cisgender adolescents. And we also see that there is an important role for the peer and family context here. And I hope that in our future work, we can focus more on the development of intimate relationships among sexual and gender minority adolescents, and especially when sexual and gender minority adolescents have those relationships with heterosexual and cisgender adolescents. There needs to be more and specific attention for experiences by trans and non-binary and bisexual adolescents. And we really need to learn more about the sexual scripts for sexual and gender minority adolescents, as well as the role of peer and family relationships and how they might gear adolescents toward relationships and behavior that ultimately undermine their sexual, physical, and mental health. And last, we need to think more critically about links between general oppression of sexual and gender minority individuals in our societies and how these systems of transphobia, homophobia, biphobia can be observed in intimate relationships. Okay, I want to end by thanking everyone for their attention. I have the 2 references here to the papers that can be found online, and I hope that we have some time for questions.